I pressed my palms against the smooth fabric of the navy dress, watching the way the beads at the cuffs caught the afternoon light. My name is Elaine Carter, 62 years old, once a head nurse who spent most of her life in practical shoes and cardigans. I don't remember the last time I wore anything this delicate. I zipped it, carefully slid a silver brooch into place, and for a moment the mirror showed me a woman I hardly recognized. She looked elegant, composed, as if she belonged at the center of a celebration. The truth was, I had been the invisible hand behind that celebration. Every check I signed, venue catering the quartet that would play, while guests sipped champagne, came from the life I had built, penny by penny. I wanted Daniel, my only son, to stand in the glow of something perfect, something that looked effortless, even if it meant I carried the weight alone. He didn't know how many late nights I had worked, or how many vacations I never took to make sure this day wouldn't collapse under unpaid bills. What I never held in my hands, though, was an invitation. Each afternoon I checked the mailbox expecting an envelope with my name in cursive proof that I had a place in his new life. Nothing ever came. I told myself it must be an oversight, maybe lost in the mail, maybe still on its way. Still, I circled the date on my calendar and hung the dress in my closet, waiting for the moment I would step into the room and see my son smile. But in the quiet of my kitchen, staring at that unopened mailbox, doubt curled inside me like smoke. What if the invitation wasn't late? What if it was never meant to come at all? That thought followed me everywhere, growing heavier until the day I walked into the wedding hall, determined to see the truth for myself. The wedding planner's office smelled faintly of lilies and ink. A binder thick as a Bible sat open on the table, each page marked with numbers that represented months of my savings. I signed where she pointed my pen, steady though inside my chest there was a tremor I didn't let show. "Mrs. Carter," she said gently, "do you want your name on the sponsor list? It might mean a lot for people to know." I shook my head. "I'm not here for credit, just the outcome." She studied me for a moment, maybe wondering why anyone would pour this much into a wedding and remain invisible. But she couldn't know the history. She didn't know how Daniel recoiled whenever I offered money directly, as if pride were more important than gratitude. Yet when the bills came, when the catering deposits were due, my checks were quietly accepted under the planner's letterhead. I closed the binder and slid it toward her. The deal was sealed. Walking back to my car, I passed the laundromat I once worked at after my husband died. I could almost see the younger version of myself behind the counter, folding shirts late into the night, while Daniel did his homework in the corner. Every dime I earned back then built the foundation for him to reach higher. That memory softened me for a moment, enough to steady my steps. I placed the dress carefully on the back seat, adjusted the brooch so it wouldn't snag, and sat behind the wheel. Outside, traffic hummed. Inside, silence pressed against me. I told myself the invitation would come soon. It had to. But each day that passed without it made the binder I had signed feel less like a gift and more like a secret that was already weighing me down. The first week I checked the mailbox with a flutter of hope. Bills, catalogs, even a flyer for gutter cleaning, but no invitation. By the second week, I found myself opening the box twice a day, convincing myself that maybe the postal worker had left it late. Still nothing. One evening, the phone rang and Sophie's bright voice filled the line. "Grandma, you won't believe it. The venue has this massive oak tree in the center, and they're wrapping it in lights. It's like something out of a fairy tale." Her laughter carried through the receiver, warm and unguarded. She told me about Paulina's dress being altered in New York, about the menu with lamb and figs, about the rehearsal dinner where everyone clinked glasses under chandeliers. I listened, smiling where I should, saying, "That sounds magical." But she never once asked what I'd be wearing. Never asked if I had a ride, a place at a table, or even a reason to be excited. The omission was sharper than any insult. When we hung up, I sat in the dim light of my kitchen staring at the calendar. The date was circled in red ink, bold and unavoidable. My heart told me the invitation must be on its way, just delayed, maybe lost. But my mind whispered something colder. Maybe it was never meant to come. Each morning I pressed the flap of the mailbox open, bracing myself. Each evening I closed it again with the same hollow disappointment. By the time 10 days had passed, I no longer felt anticipation. I felt suspicion wrapping itself tighter around me, like smoke I couldn't escape. And still I ironed the dress, polished my shoes, and set the silver brooch on the dresser. If no invitation was coming, then I would go without one. The hotel shimmered like something pulled from a magazine-spread marble floors, polished to a mirror, shine golden chandeliers glowing above a sea of dark suits and sequined gowns. I stepped inside, clutching my silver clutch, tight enough that the metal frame bit into my palm. Every detail I saw towering arrangements of roses, a string quartet, weaving soft music through the air was something I had paid for. And yet not a single face turned toward me with recognition. I moved slowly through the crowd, scanning for someone familiar. Paulina's parents stood near the entry to the courtyard, laughing with friends in black tie. I nodded politely, but they didn't meet my eyes. I kept walking, trying not to feel like an intruder at an event I had built with my own hands. Then I saw him. Daniel. His suit was tailored, his smile polished for the guests surrounding him. For one suspended moment, I imagined he would spot me, light up, and call me over. Instead, his gaze landed on me like a stone. His jaw tightened. He excused himself from the group and strode toward me with quick, controlled steps. "Mom," he said low and urgent, placing a hand on my elbow and steering me toward a quiet alcove by the fountain. "We talked about this." My heart pounded. "We haven't talked in weeks." You knew he insisted, eyes darting as though someone might overhear. "You weren't invited." The words hit harder than any slap. "I'm your mother." I whispered, my voice steady, though my body trembled. "This is Paulina's day. Her family, her clients, everyone important is here. I can't have reminders hanging around." His voice cut through me, sharp and practiced. For a breath, I wanted to argue, to shout, to remind him of every sacrifice. Instead, I straightened my back. If he wanted me invisible, then I would vanish on my own terms. I walked out of the hotel the same way I had entered, unnoticed. No one turned. No one called after me. The music swelled behind the doors, muffled by glass, while I crossed the marble lobby and pushed through the revolving door into the night air. The valet lifted a hand to ask if I needed my car. I shook my head, kept walking until I reached the lot. My heels clicked against the pavement steady despite the storm inside me. When I opened the car door and sat down, the silence was so thick it pressed against my ears. For a long moment, I simply gripped the steering wheel and let the truth settle. I had been erased from my own son's life. Then I pulled out my phone. Richmond Bank. "This is Allison. How can I help you?" "This is Elaine Carter," I said, my voice even. "I need to cancel all pending payments to Charlotte Premier Events and its affiliates, effective immediately." There was a pause on the line. "Ma'am, some of those are scheduled for today. Canceling now could trigger penalties." "I understand. Do it anyway." She asked for verification, and I gave it without hesitation. My voice didn't waver once. When the call ended, I dialed the planner directly. Mrs. Carter, the young assistant, answered, confusion in her tone. "The banquet starts in less than 2 hours. Everything's already in motion. You'll inform the bride and groom that their sponsor has withdrawn," I said. "The bank is reversing every payment. The rest is between you and them." Her gasp lingered in my ear as I ended the call. I slipped the phone back into my clutch and exhaled slowly. Inside the hotel, the lights still glowed and the music still floated into the night. But I knew the foundation beneath that glitter was already gone. The phone rang before I had even started the engine. Sophie's name flashed across the screen. "Grandma." Her voice was hushed, frantic. "Something's happening." The music stopped. The flowers are being pulled off the tables. The staff, they're leaving all at once. Everyone's whispering. I pictured the ballroom unraveling in real time. The roses I had ordered wilting in buckets. The string quartet packing up their instruments mid-song. "Your dad's red-faced," she went on. "Paulina's crying. Her father looks like he's ready to sue someone. People are asking questions. They just said, They just said the payments were pulled. Her words broke on the line. I closed my eyes, leaning my head against the seat. Yes, sweetheart, I said quietly. That was me. You? The word was almost a gasp. You paid for it all, and now I haven't. I finished for her. Silence stretched, filled only by the muffled chaos echoing in the background. I could hear a man shouting the crash of glass, the planner's voice trying to explain. Then Sophie whispered, trembling, "They know it was you. They're saying the sponsor was you and that you stopped it." I let the stillness hold us. "I wasn't invited, Sophie," I told her gently, "but I was expected to pay. That's not love. That's not family." A shaky breath rattled through the phone. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice small. "No, darling. None of this is yours to carry." I could hear footsteps, voices closing in around her. "I need to go," she said quickly. "Everyone's panicking." "Call me later," I told her, "when it's quiet again." I ended the call, slid the phone into my lap, and stared at the glowing hotel. Somewhere inside, the perfect illusion I had built was collapsing piece by piece. It was nearly midnight when the pounding started on my front door. His voice carried through the wood, raw and furious. "Open up, Mom. I know you're in there." I tied my robe tighter and opened the door. Daniel stood in the porch light. His suit wrinkled, his tie hanging loose like an afterthought. His eyes were wild, his face blotched with anger. "You humiliated me," he spat, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "You sabotaged everything I built." I closed the door quietly. "Would you like some coffee? I don't want coffee." He paced the living room like a caged animal. "You ruined my wedding, in front of everyone." "You mean the one I paid for?" I asked evenly. "I never asked you to pay," he snapped. "No," I said, calm as stone. "You never asked. You just accepted." His fists clenched and unclenched. "You went behind my back, made it about you. You always do." I took a slow breath, then let the words spill in the silence between us. "The down payment on your first condo, $40,000. Your tuition bills. The credit card debt I covered 3 separate times. The car loan. The divorce lawyer. The birthday trips. The emergency wires at 2 a.m. Shall I keep going?" His mouth opened, but no words came. "You were never a real mother to me." He finally hissed, his voice cracking. "Just a paycheck." For a moment, those words should have broken me. Once they would have, but not tonight. "Then I've stopped pretending," I said quietly. His eyes narrowed, confusion sparking beneath the rage. "Pretending I'm welcome where I'm not. Pretending you respect me. Pretending my worth ends when my checkbook closes." The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting could have been. I walked to the cabinet by the window and pulled out a folder I had kept hidden there for weeks. The papers were neatly clipped, notarized, every line reviewed more times than I could count. I set the folder on the table between us and flipped it open. "This," I said, tapping the top page, "is what you came for, isn't it?" "The money?" Daniel's eyes darted to the papers. His lips pressed into a thin line. Is that the refund?" There was a flicker of hope in his voice, desperate and small. "No," I said, sliding the notarized document closer. "It's a trust fund. In Sophie's name. $86,000 fully funded. Her tuition, housing, graduate school if she chooses. It's irrevocable." His face twisted. "You can't be serious." "I am," I answered. His voice rose. "She's my daughter." "And she's my granddaughter," I shot back. "And unlike you, she's never treated me like a forgotten obligation." The color drained from his cheeks, replaced by a raw, pulsing anger. "You did this to spite me, to get back at me for tonight." I leaned forward, my voice steady measured. "No, Daniel. I did this so Sophie grows up knowing love isn't measured by how much you can take from someone, but how much you protect them from becoming like you." For a second, he recoiled as though I had struck him. His hands trembled at his sides, his breath sharp and uneven. He wanted to fight to scream, but the papers on the table told him the battle was already lost. He glared at me, jaw tight. "You'll regret this." "No," I said, closing the folder with a quiet snap. "For the first time in years, I won't." Daniel stared at me a moment longer, his face twisted with rage, then turned sharply toward the door. The slam echoed through the house, rattling the frames on the wall, but I didn't flinch. I simply stood in the quiet he left behind, listening to the sound fade into nothing. For years, that door had been a revolving line of emergencies, Daniel showing up with another crisis, another debt, another plea. Tonight it closed differently. Tonight I knew it might never open for him again, and that truth didn't hollow me out the way I once feared. It steadied me. I carried the folder back to the table, opened it one more time, and smoothed the edges of the papers with my hand. Every signature was in place, every seal final. Sophie's future was no longer a dream scribbled in notes. It was secured, tangible, untouchable. I exhaled slowly, realizing I wasn't shaking. For so long I had lived on edge, bracing myself for the next demand, the next disappointment. Now sitting there in the quiet of my living room, I felt a stillness I hadn't known in decades. I slid the folder into the drawer labeled Legacy and pressed it shut. My house was small, my life modest, but for the first time, both felt wholly mine. The magnolia tree outside swayed in the night breeze, petals scattering across the lawn. I stood by the window and let the sight settle into me. No longer the invisible sponsor, no longer the open wallet at the edge of a family gathering. I was just Elaine, and that was enough. Tomorrow the fallout would spread. Gossip, blame, accusations. But tonight the only sound that mattered was the soft hum of silence carrying the promise of a life no longer dictated by someone else's needs. Savannah greeted me with salt air and magnolia blooms. The house I chose was smaller than the one in Raleigh, but every curtain, every lamp, and every chair belonged to me. Not a compromise, not a symbol of someone else's expectations, just mine. On Tuesdays and Fridays, I joined a watercolor class at the community center. We painted sea turtles and wildflowers, our hands stained with color, our laughter spilling across the tables. I wasn't very good, but it didn't matter. No one there knew me as Daniel's mother or the woman who paid for the wedding. They knew me only as Elaine, the woman who laughed more than she once did. One evening, I opened my phone to a message from Sophie. "Highest honors. I graduate next month. Couldn't have done it without you." The words blurred through my tears, but they were tears of joy this time, not loss. I pressed the phone to my chest and whispered, "You did it, sweetheart." I had tickets already tucked into my drawer, 7 days on a Caribbean cruise, an ocean-facing cabin, no itinerary except the one I made for myself. When I zipped my suitcase, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if the weight of unspoken obligations had finally slipped from my shoulders. On the morning of departure, Sophie stopped by with croissants and too much almond milk. She talked about her summer fellowship, her dream of designing sustainable housing, the kind of work that would leave the world better than she found it. Her eyes glowed, and I saw the future blooming in her, a legacy more valuable than any wedding I could have paid for. Later that afternoon, I wheeled my bag to the dock. The ship rose high and white against the sky, a floating city promising horizons I had never dared to imagine. As I stepped aboard, the wind lifted my hair, and I let it carry away the last remnants of regret. I leaned against the railing, the water stretching endless and blue before me. For so long I had waited for an invitation to a wedding, to a table, to a place in my son's world. Now I understood the truth. The only invitation I ever needed was the one I gave myself the freedom to live, to choose to begin again. And for the first time, I was right where I was meant to be. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.